Aloha, everyone. Welcome and mahalo to all of you for joining us for tonight's Hawaiian Electric Resilient and Renewable Energy Community Workshop. We are broadcasting live from Kapiolani Community College. Mahalo to KCC for hosting us. And mahalo to all of you who are joining us in person as well as online and those watching on Olelo. I just wanted to briefly introduce myself. My name is Kurt Sui. I'm the director for Hawaiian Electric's Community Affairs Division. To my left will be Alani Apio. He is going to be our facilitator tonight from Kamau LLC. To my side here, we have our Director of Transmission, Distribution, and Interconnection Planning at Hawaiian Electric, Ken Aramaki. And also from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, Katie Wachter, who's a Geospatial Science Researcher 3. Also joining us later on in our Q&A portion is our Senior Vice President of Planning and Technology at Hawaiian Electric, Colton Ching. And I just wanted to also give a big shout out and mahalo to the Centers for Resilient Neighborhoods, or SERENE. They're awesome partners in doing great community work in terms of trying to identify resilience hubs across the island. And they're doing some really great work in this moku, in the Kona moku here tonight that they'll be sharing as part of tonight's discussion. And also big mahalo to our partners at Olelo for helping us to put on this meeting in this different format where we could offer it hybrid for those who could join us in person, and mahalo to all of you for doing that, and all of you joining us on Zoom and watching live as well. So just thank you all for your time. We really appreciate it. For those joining us online, we had an open house for a half hour prior to tonight's meeting. There really isn't any additional content. We're going to be sharing all of that same information as part of tonight's meeting, so you won't have missed anything information-wise, only the opportunity to engage. We have a lot of our subject matter experts that are present at these workshops, and we make ourselves available during the open house portion, and we hope to provide meals and refreshments for those who join us. So in case you are able to join us in future workshops, we welcome you and we look forward to seeing you. But we also understand everybody is busy and it's not easy to attend community meetings, so Olelo is helping us to live stream this meeting, and it will be recorded and posted online for viewing at your convenience. At Hawaiian Electric, our communities count on us to keep the lights on. And it's also our responsibility to stabilize energy costs by transitioning off of fossil fuel. That's part of the reason we're here tonight, is to talk about working with the community in transitioning off of fossil fuels as we work to integrate more renewable energy. We understand that costs are a significant concern, and we're happy to have offline conversations about energy costs in future discussions. The purpose of tonight's meeting, we're really going to be focusing on how we're working to decarbonize our energy system, and also to make it more resilient in light of climate change. For those of us who've seen in the news, Puerto Rico and Florida are very recent examples of why we need to start planning now to make our energy system more resilient, and how that can impact a lot of the other areas that we're focusing on to be more prepared as an island state. Tonight, we wanted to introduce two separate but related concepts. If we can show the first slide, please. Related to renewable energy and planning for resilience. The first portion of our discussion will be on opportunities for microgrids. So microgrids can serve critical facilities connected to the electric grid, but they can be islanded or sectioned off during a power outage to continue providing energy or electricity using local energy resources. So part of the reason we're here tonight is to ask this Moku community members, should a microgrid or this concept be considered for the community, and if so, what facilities should be included? The second portion of tonight's workshop will be on our long-range energy planning for the island of Oahu at the macro level. We want to ask the community, how should we plan for our energy system to bring online the renewable generation sources that are needed to meet our demands and needs while achieving our decarbonization and resilience goals? So those are the two areas that we'll be talking about as part of tonight's workshop. Both of these important concepts all go through the planning, procurement, and development process, and critical to both of those concepts is community input to make sure that we plan accordingly. So these are not easy concepts and questions, but they're extremely important. And again, part of the reason why we're putting on these workshops is to try something different and make it easier for communities to participate earlier in the energy planning process. Next slide, please, Ken. So this is something that we've learned over time. Traditionally, the utility has been very technically focused, and we can come up with great engineering solutions, but they might not always be what's best for our communities. And so on going forward, and the reason, and we thank all of you for joining us, and a critical part of the planning process is to involve community as part of the planning. And so again, technically, does it work? But also, is it what's best for us as communities moving forward? And asking ourselves and our communities, how do these changes that result from our transition to renewable energy and making the grid more resilient, how does that impact all of us in our neighborhoods and in our everyday lives? And balancing that will be critical to us achieving our long-term goals. So again, it must really be a strong balance of customer choice, community insight, along with engineering and technology. The biggest element that we can all agree on is it's not going to be easy, but achieving our renewable energy goals is going to require all of us working together. So just to underscore how important it's been to work with communities, most recently, those of you who some may participate in the renewable energy planning and process, we've had a lot of improvements that have been made to our procurement through what's known as our request for proposals. Working with leadership on the west side of the island, there have been significant improvements that have been integrated and incorporated into the energy planning with the help of communities who came together. They shared concerns and interests, and they aligned their interests. They worked together to file their comments and documented them with the Public Utilities Commission, and that led to improvements that were made to the planning process. And that's what we hope to replicate in other communities, where we can convene and get communities to come out and to share information and to really share what's expertise that comes out from community discussions, and a lot of that is already going on. So just really appreciate the time that goes into convening and sharing this information. And so with that, I'm going to transition over to Ken Aramaki. Ken's going to introduce the first portion of our meeting that's going to talk a little bit more about what are microgrids and how can they make our energy system more resilient. And just also mentioning, there's going to be an active engagement for answering questions, providing comments that we'll be transitioning to after Ken provides the information. Ken?
Thanks, Kurt. Aloha, everyone. My name is Ken Aramaki. I'm the Director of Transmission, Distribution, and Interconnection Planning at Hawaiian Electric. To start, so first I'm going to cover what we talk about is we talk about microgrids. So I want to make sure that we distinctly know what we're talking about in this section, which is microgrids. I'm going to we're going to have more presentations and questions, and I'm going to come back and I'm going to talk about something sort of different, but complementary. Okay, so when we talk about microgrids, the first thing to kind of bring up is everyone knows that energy is critical. This diagram shows how critical energy really is. All of these circles in this diagram are what's called community lifelines. And each of those are essential to human health and safety or economic security. And each of them are independent, but at the center of it, what supports them all is energy. So we have to make sure that we find opportunities to improve energy resilience. Okay, and then some utility and microgrid 101. Okay, so our energy grid was built a long time ago, and when it was built as a one-way system. So generally, bulk generation or large generators providing energy through transmission network, and then being stepped down through substations, and then ultimately getting to customers. Over the past decade to 2 decades, we've been getting a lot of, over the past few decades, we've been getting a lot more of independent power producers, especially renewable resources, interconnected to the grid. And so these are interconnected at various points on the grid that were not necessarily originally designed for that, that connection. In addition, in the past maybe decade or so, there have been a lot of customer-sited resources. So customer-sited resources are stuff like rooftop PV or battery storage, also generators. And these resources were traditionally added to help customers offset their bills. With also advancements in technologies, these customers could also become microgrids themselves. So this is what we call, in the two smaller circles, there's customer microgrids. These are microgrids that an individual customer can be islanded off of the grid if there's a disturbance, and they can provide enough energy for themselves to provide backup power, essentially. What we're going to talk about in this section is what we call hybrid microgrids. Hybrid microgrids take that a step further, and what they are it's a cluster of customers who are individually served by the utility on a normal day-to-day basis. But with a hybrid microgrid, they can have the ability to become a microgrid while using utility lines within that microgrid. So they use various resources among different customers, and they aggregate those resources to provide energy when it's needed. So I'm looking at faces, and yes, it is a complex process. So that's what when we were developing this program, we do have a tariff that allows the development of hybrid microgrids, and we knew when we were going through the process, okay, this is going to be super hard for customers to even know whether this is even an option in their area. So around the same time, this Energy Transitions Initiative Partnership Project came about, and we call it ETIP because that's too many words. So we're going to reference ETIP a lot, and that's this essentially a DOE-funded pro bono technical work from the national labs. So we have Katie here, who's also going to talk. Katie, as well as she's from National Renewable Energy Laboratories, or NREL, and she also, as a part of her team, is Sandia National Labs, or SNL, another laboratory, and HNEI, Hawaii Natural Energy Institute. So all these team members combined helping us to develop a map. And this map it's a map for Oahu, and it's looking at different characteristics of the grid. It's looking at different characteristics of the customer makeup, also what types of generating resources are in the area, and it's developing areas that are showing to have a good opportunity to create these hybrid microgrids. So this is at least an initial step for customers to know if this is an option for me, if it's something to pursue. Oh, that was it? Yeah, so now I'm going to bring up Katie, and she's going to go over the technical parts of the microgrid mapping.
And just to add to Ken's, what Ken was sharing, the DOE, the Federal Department of Energy, we're working on our acronyms, so thanks for bearing with us.
Cool. Thanks, Ken and Kurt. Can y'all hear me okay? Okay, I always feel like I'm too tall. Anyway, so thanks everybody for being here. It's really amazing to see communities out talking about energy resilience, especially around the work that I find is usually less exciting, on the data side for people to really get into. Like Ken was saying, I wanted to give a shout out to our collaborators, Dr. Matt Lave and Thad Haynes at Sandia National Labs for helping with the engineering side of this. I'm a geographer, so I'm the one who combined all the different mapping criteria that we're going to be talking about. So we have evaluated a few different sets of criteria with this work and kind of put them into 3 different buckets. The first one is called criticality. It describes There we go. Where are the critical loads, facilities, and services? So these are things that cover emergencies like emergency shelters, fire stations, emergency operation centers, medical facilities, particularly ones with advanced levels of care like hospitals, outpatient facilities, surgical centers, and that includes nursing homes and other skilled care facilities, as well as critical infrastructure, so water sources, treatment, internet exchange points, telecommunications, dams, bridges, ports, airports, anything that if something were to go wrong and power was lost there, life and limb may be affected. The second criteria that we looked at was vulnerability, so looking at what parts of the grid are currently and are projected to endure the longest or most frequent outages. So with that, we looked specifically at natural hazards and inaccessibility, so as special flood hazard areas, so that's 1% chance flood or 100-year flood level, as well as sea level rise through the low emission scenario through 2050, as well as landslide risk, tsunami evacuation zones, and remoteness index, which looks at how far away these communities are and how reliant they are on fewer avenues of either roads or transmission, and as well as outages. So that's a 10-year range that HECO was able to provide. And the third criteria was societal impact, so looking at what other locations are would significantly impact communities if they lost power. So this includes residential care facilities, community homes, schools, daycares, libraries, customers in existing assistance programs, as well as disadvantaged communities, which for this analysis follows the Department of Energy's definition, which follows the Justice 40 definition that includes 36 different categories of burden data. So when we combine it all, the criteria include things that affect life and limb, grid reliability, but also we wanted to make sure that we had some representation of customers that would be disproportionately affected by outages, so ensuring that equity and accessibility are considered, in addition to all of the critical facilities that are listed here. So really what we're looking for is that combination of all three criteria, but also it's important to recognize that areas with one or more criteria are also important for consideration for hybrid microgrids. So this mapping exercise covers all of Oahu. It incorporates dozens of spatial data sets representing electricity distribution infrastructure as well as communities. So we built a model showing where all of the grid-connected customer energy resources are located, as well as electricity demand at the building level to figure out where they're balanced in order to potentially cite or look at opportunities for hybrid microgrids. But one thing that's been really clear throughout this process is that this map is incomplete. It focuses on infrastructure and not the people that live in these communities, and not at how they're affected by service disruptions. So this is where you all can come in. We've included a lot of data in our analysis, but we have some questions we can't answer on our own. Are there criteria that are missing? Is our list of what we considered incomplete? And in addition, and perhaps more importantly, what places in your community should be included? And we'd love to have your perspective on this. And to do this, we've prepared this map to help show what we've looked at. Oh, whoops. There we go. This map is available online at hawaiipower.com/ETIP. That's ETIPP. And we encourage you all to go visit hawaiipower.com/ETIP and provide your perspective as well. Or if you're in the room with us, come talk to us either at the MAPS or throughout this Q&A period. And so at the end of this project, that is this ETIP project, we'll share community-level maps for hybrid microgrid opportunities like this one at Hula. And the goal is to show where the criteria that we've looked at meet the community's resources. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Kurt and Alani for Q&A.
So thanks for that, Katie. And Ken, if we can show the next one. We're going to be trying something different again. And for those who are in person, those joining on Zoom, or even those watching on Olelo, if you're familiar with QR codes, you can scan this QR code, or you can just go to the website on your mobile device or computer, www.menti.com. So we're going to be showing a screen that you can contribute comments, questions to, that all of us will be able to see, both in person, online, and even those watching live. So you just go to the website, menti.com, you enter the code 77208472, or if you scan the QR code using your camera phone, it'll take you directly to the website and you can enter the code the same way. But essentially, it's one vehicle for providing questions and comments. For those who are in person, you can ask the question live. You can also enter it in the Zoom for those joining us virtually. So we're going to be monitoring those different channels and trying to collect information and having dialogue on what community members would like to ask questions or feedback and comments they would like to share. I also wanted to mention that all the input that's provided, both here tonight as part of tonight's workshop, as well as going forward, if you need more time to think about this and visit us on our website, there's going to be the same opportunities to see the same visuals that we're sharing here tonight. And then you can take deeper dives and take a closer look at the analysis that Katie and the team have done. And then you can provide your input. We're going to create reports for each of these workshops, we're going to every moku across Oahu. And we're going to be documenting this as a first step, as part of the information collection process. This is both for this portion, the next portion of tonight's workshop, but it's going to be an ongoing process. It's something that we definitely would like you to continue engaging with us, to talking about, because this is really just the initial stages. We're trying to involve community along with us in the initial stages of our planning. But that being said, Ken, would you mind queuing up the first question? And so we're really going to be opening it up to anybody here tonight, and again, joining us online. One prompting question was just your thoughts, your questions about these concepts for microgrids in your community to help make your community more resilient. And specifically, what types of facilities, like Katie said, are missing in this microgrid analysis, or any inputs or insights that you would like to share with us, or questions you would have so that you can provide input about your community?
Thank you, Kurt. So the way that a couple points for everybody. I'm going to use this one for the community members. There we go. So just so you know, I have a couple points that I wanted to bring to the audience. One is, this is our third public meeting. We had one in Hauula or Kouku and one in Waianae. If you watch online or if you watch the tapes, you'll see that they're slightly different. Part of that, well, the reason for that is we're trying to better our process every night. So we're trying to tighten up our talking points, trying to react to what community feedback. So from that, I want to let you folks know this is a long-term process. This is really the start for both microgrids and the longer-term siting questions about where big renewable energy projects are going to go on this island. It's the beginning of a dialogue that hopefully we will engage people and be lasting years. And with saying that is the recognition that this was a lot of information to take in. And so we encourage you guys to keep coming back online. If it's not in your community, the next meeting, check with us online, watch it, because what I'm finding myself as the facilitator is every time I listen to the information, I'm getting more and more clear about what we're trying to do. And I can't tell you how important your community engagement is. Because the reality is, I think most of us who live here saw what went down in Kahuku several years ago, and what ended up being a fight of community members against other community members. Nobody benefits from that situation. And it was unintended, but what the reality is if we don't get community engagement and deep interaction with things that we don't know, science doesn't know, for example, when we went out to Kahuku people, that one of the places that they head up to in a natural disaster is this reservoir area in Kahana Valley. We didn't know that. That's community knowledge that we need to hear that will make our Hawaiian Electric's planning process, the PUC's oversight process better. So with that, we're here to take any questions that you folks have tonight. We are here to take in all of your folks' feedback about your own neighborhoods. We're going around the island, right? So we've broken it out into the moku, the districts on this island. And for those who are watching online or Zoom or on Olelo, please know that I'm favoring the audience here to interact with, but everybody who interacts with us online through the Menti, everything is being taken in, and it will become part of the record. So please don't feel like if you're online or watching on Olelo and participating through Menti that you won't be heard. You will absolutely be heard, and those responses will come to our report. So without taking up any more time, this dense moku, this dense district of East Honolulu has its own challenges. And so, for example, I live in Kailua, and the first thought when I thought about where a microgrid would go is Castle Hospital. That's our biggest, hospital, and it's surrounded by important places like the fire station, Kailua High School, etc. So, going back to our initial prompting question, what other community facilities are missing or should be included in the microgrid analysis for East Honolulu, for your folks' home? And just to be clear, if you're still unclear about what a microgrid is, please ask, or some part of it, please ask that question. That's why we got the people here tonight.
Hi, I'm Bob Franco from Kapiolani here. I completed a survey that the Department of Urban and Regional Planning did, and for my area, and I really thought that was the key piece, sort of to visualize where you'd want to go for energy in your neck of the woods. And that's why we call our center the Center for Resilient Neighborhoods, because we think there's a place-based focus that people need to have around energy, water, and a number of other things. When I came to the end, they asked me a question similar to this one, and I thought about health, and where I live, I'm sort of Kalaniana Ole dependent, and then Cam Highway dependent around to Kailua, and if that all got washed away, I wouldn't have any access to health care, except for the smaller health clinics that are, say, in shopping centers and things like that. So for me and most people in the Hawaii Kai area, I think some sort of microgrid system that's located at, say, the Straub facility, the urgent care facility, those smaller places that might have to carry the load in terms of serious injury until those roads opened up.
Thank you for that. Really appreciate it. And just for clarity, where the Straub facility is where?
It's in the shopping center with Safeway. I never remember that.
Out at
one.
Hawaii Kai.
Hawaii
Got
Kai,
it.
yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Please.
So I guess I'm going to come from a slightly similar perspective to go on Bob's point. So if we are in a disaster event and we have first responders, I know one of the city's initiatives is to have a 100% renewable fleet of vehicles. So our emergency response vehicles would theoretically be all electric. So was there any consideration in base yards or other localities for where these city fleets would be? Because I think that would definitely be a place that would need energy.
Huge unintended consequence of electrifying the auto system. Do we have any comments from Hawaiian Electric crew about whether that has been taken in or not?
So to answer the two questions, the first one about urgent care facilities or ambulatory care, that is included in the criticality analysis. The point about charging facilities, those are not currently on there. So that's a good thing to provide us.
Thank you so much for that. Hugely appreciated. Other comments or questions? And when it's appropriate, like the gentleman brought up, if there's a specificity to your neighborhood that you want to bring up, now's the, absolutely the time to give it to us, but also know that go home, think about it, and you're like, oh, but wait a minute, we need that there. Please do let us know those things. That's why this is going to be a long-term process. And even while we're doing it, situations on the ground change. So we need to stay connected to you folks. Questions, concerns, thoughts?
There's been two comments. There's been two comments.
Hold on, let me give you this one.
Two comments have been asking to redefine what a microgrid is and also why it could or should be of benefit to the community. So maybe just a recap of what the question really is.
Thank you. Thank you for catching that. Can you address?
So I can take that. So to re-explain what a microgrid is.
Can I take a shot at it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'll just correct you.
Thank you. So I'm going to use my own neighborhood, Castle Hospital in Kailua. And when I think about my ahupua'a and my district, I'm thinking, okay, we've had some scares. And I live literally a stone's throw away from Castle Hospital. And I know that everybody's thinking, Castle's got to be kept up because in an emergency, people are potentially going to get hurt. Where are they going to get relief? How are we going to address them? So in my mind, I'm thinking, this was even before microgrids was a concept to me. Okay, how do we keep Castle running? So what a microgrid is, in layman's terms, to my mind, is, for example, Castle is part of the electrical system. They're on Hawaiian Electric's grid. Down the road from it is Kailua High School. They have emergency ability, to have people come at the school in the context of a storm comes through. They've got reinforced buildings. Also, down the road from us, from Castle Hospital, is a fire station. Also, right around the corner, 2 blocks away, is one of Hawaiian Electric's substations. So what I'm thinking, and this is where Ken corrects me if I'm wrong, is that all of those places are very close to each other and on the same grid. They're connected electrical-wise. So what a microgrid would do is reconfigure the electrical system, and I don't know how it's done, although I know that they could do it, so that if power goes down around the island, there's that web of hardened lines that will connect those important places. And within that process, the microgrid is citing some source of power production at one of those places so that if and when the power goes down, it's like, say, for example, it was a big diesel generator. The big diesel generator gets powered up, powers Castle Hospital, powers the fire station down the road, powers Kailua High School, and now we're facing a storm where we've got these critical places in our community still running and able to help people. Is that?
Good. Yeah.
Okay, so within the context.
Maybe not.
No, I just wanted to add, Bob, if you wouldn't mind sharing again the work that Serene is doing, because there's work being done in this moku, in the Kona moku, Miku as well. I mean, I think both of you can speak to the first responders role concept.
Yeah, I think we have an Action 15 grant from the Office of Climate Change, Sustainability, and Resiliency of the city and county, and we're partnering with the Department of Urban and Regional Planning at Manoa to identify 1 to 2 resilience hubs in each of the Oahu Moku, or planning areas. And we're kind of thinking of structures as these resilience hubs. What kind of services would those structures provide? You just listed a set of services across 4 different locations, but nothing was said about, say, food or water or just general communications where people can go get answers to questions in a difficult situation. So we're just doing another set of community engagement workshops in each of the planning areas using the data that came from the Department of Urban and Regional Planning at Manoa to sort of do some of the criticality things and some of the same mapping exercises that you're doing. We're doing that with the support of Hawaiian Electric, who are funding our Resilience Corps leaders. I think we have 3 of them here tonight. So we're trying to get this to be part of the students' learning experience at the college. So they're doing this work in their neighborhoods. But I think there'll be some overlap. This is, from our perspective, this is really the energy lifeline of these hubs. What does that look like? And it might not actually be in a particular facility, but it might be down the street, and it might be solar powered or some other source of power. We're also spending a lot of time around vulnerable populations. So we're doing a lot of work around Kupuna, the Kupuna Collective. We had a workshop last week with Pacific Islander pastors who responded very well to the COVID epidemic. I'm a social scientist, so I'm sort of interested in the human dimension of these hubs.
Thank you. And these human dimensions are the only way these hubs work. James, you mentioned that there were 2 questions that you thought were important to get clarified. One was about what exactly is the right microgrid. What was the other one?
And the other one was, what was it in it for the community? But I think your answer kind of answered that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
My question is to clarify that some more. So is this just for like emergencies, or is this microgrids for day-to-day life? And because those are 2 different issues, you know?
Good question. Thank you very much. You want to take a shot?
Yeah, the primary objective of these hybrid microgrids is to provide backup energy or backup power in a time of an emergency. So yeah, that's why they're cited more critical sites, also taking into account areas that are prone to having either longer term outages or more frequent outages.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, except for the rural part of things, which it seems like having a microgrid in rural areas would be important all the time, not just for emergencies.
Just so we're clear, the microgrid would exist, and it's just basically the on and off of it. So you build a microgrid, and so say, for example, those vulnerable communities that we know, Punalu'u side, all up and down the coast that get flooded out and get shut off, right? So if, for example, a microgrid gets built in Kahuku, it's there for the community to use in whatever situation would be necessary. It's not necessarily on 24/7, but it's available 24/7, 365 days a year. So it's a permanent scenario. It's a permanent structural element that'll get added to the system. And hold on.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember the decarbonizing aspect of this. So there is that longer term purpose to this work. So you have these microgrids out there in case of emergency, but really it's about decarbonizing Hawaii's energy sources. So,
thank you. Interestingly, to that point, when we were out in Kahuku, we asked the question about, well, if we do site a microgrid in your community, how would you like it powered? And the response, not surprisingly, was, if we're in an emergency and everything's gone down, we don't really care how you power it. We want it to work. So it's a more complicated question that we're going to sort out and work on over the years. Because if it's solar and battery backup, if we had a 2006 event where we've got 40 days of no sunshine, then where did we end up? So, everybody think that's a 1 in 100 year event, but we don't know. So all of those things have to be considered. Questions
Alani, we have one
Yes.
online. If
Oh,
we can-
terrific. Okay, who's giving that? Got it. Okay, we're going to unmute Valerie. This is exciting. This is the first time we've done this.
Hi, my name is Valerie. I'm a nursing student from Chaminade. Recently, I joined a community resiliency hub workshop at Waikiki Community Center. I think this is the perfect time to talk about it since we're discussing about which areas microgrids should be developed. Since microgrids are mainly for during disasters, I think we should, during this community resiliency hub workshop, we discussed areas where would be perfect for people, to have people join in for during a disaster. And I think we should focus on those areas. In my group, when we discuss which is a perfect area to have, for people to commit like a disaster shelter, we had Kapilani Community College as one of that area. And I think we should focus on all these areas that, people choose to have the, community disaster shelters. And I think this is the areas where we should focus on developing the microgrids.
Valerie, thank you very much for that feedback. So just to be clear, if I'm understanding you correctly, what you're saying is one of the important criteria for the development of potential microgrids in your folks' community is where are the disaster congregation zones? Where I know there's another technical term for it, but was that? Where are the evacuation centers? So those absolutely should be a criteria, because if an evacuation center doesn't have power, how helpful is it? So Valerie, thank you for that, and thank you for joining us online. Really appreciate it. Any other questions or? Oh, okay, cool. So we're going to Angela. Angela, thank you. Go ahead.
Hello. One of the questions I had was, what power do these microgrids run off of, like in the different areas that are being assessed? Is it like renewable like solar energy?
Thank you, Angela. I'm going to turn it over to Ken for that response.
Yeah, good question. Hybrid microgrids, which uses different customers and whatever resources are already there, are all put together to form this microgrid. So the makeup of the resources in general, there's obviously a lot of rooftop solar and battery storage at customers today. So that could make a big part of what powers these microgrids. But you could also augment those resources with other types of generating resources.
So just to be clear and just to clarify what Ken had shared is, there are certain technologies that are being implemented and used now. However, ultimately, it remains to be seen and worked out both on a technical level and on a community-wide level what the best powering system for any particular microgrid is going to be. Would that be a fair statement? Yes. Okay, great. Do we have more from the online? Okay, thank you. Questions, comments? Thank you.
Actually, I have a couple of questions. One question is, with the microgrid, as you're considering locations, are you considering vacant land? That's one of them. And then for microgrid types themselves, do you have to configure them in a certain way, like triangulation or anything like that?
Thank you. Thank you for that, and I'll turn that over to Ken.
So the first question is, are we considering vacant land in this assessment? In general, no, because it's looking at where there's already customers that are being provided electricity on a blue sky day. But it gets a little more complex than that, because when we look at developing a microgrid area, you're really looking at an area that can be served with sort of this common electrical infrastructure together. So what that means is customers that are adjacent to each other and also served off of the same, basically, distribution line. And to create that microgrid, you're creating isolation points to isolate them from the grid, to have the ability to isolate them from the grid during those emergencies.
How did that make sense in that response?
I was just wondering if there's a puka somewhere. You know, if there's an area where there's a puka and there really isn't, you know, there's not a lot of things that are adjacent to one another, then would you consider development of something so that you would have more facilities to create that microgrid?
I think, oh, okay.
I think to that point, you know, with the importance of resilience hubs really comes into play, and a lot of what the work that Serene is doing is to identify the hubs having its own source of power. So I think, like you said, if there's opportunities where there are these clusters of critical facilities, then that could potentially be considered for an ideal microgrid that we could prioritize. But like you said, if there is a structure that is hardened, that is a gathering place that can accommodate people, because like the hospitals, like Alani and others mentioned, we don't want the community all going to the hospital for resources. It needs to be prioritized for that specific medical purpose. Oh, go ahead, sir.
Hold on.
Hello, Jose Andres from Serene. Thank you for taking my comment. I live in Makiki number 8 neighborhood, and my question is that during a gray sky event, it's mostly shelter in place, and I live in Kulanahale on Beretania, and that building is a neighborhood of a lot of clusters of buildings, kupuna buildings, over 60, 70. Some going a little bit farther down is a more densely populated and a lot elder population, very resilient people, I tell you. There's food distribution centers located around First Church Union. What I'm getting at is the location in question is a empty, vacant food land that's been vacant for over a year, or maybe a year and a half, 18 months. I don't know what the commercial viability is now of that site, but I'd like to identify it as a site that is very appropriate for what you were just talking about, to not overwhelm systems like Schindler Medical Center, Scheidler Medical Center that is right next door. Kapiolani Women's Shelter, there's other buildings that are hubs and that can, but like you said, we don't want to overwhelm them. So I also in the culinary program here, and do you have public utility private partnerships with commercial kitchens, established sites that, like this campus, for example, I don't know what's on the other side of over there, if we still have a kitchen or not, but these are the kind of things that as chefs, we can organize and draw on logistical support from other organizations that might have excess foods. So we do what we do to feed people, but we need power and we need a place and pots and pans and stuff. So I'm just saying.
Thank you. A couple points I heard there, and then I'll pass it over to you. I just want to make it clear what he was talking about to myself. One is, he was talking about the potential areas that he can identify now, and one is the vacant food land down in Makiki, yeah, and I think most of us know the place. So the one clarifying question is, in a broad sense, what will the process look like for identifying on a MOKU on a district level? Because it's not going to happen here tonight, that's one. And number two, on a more specific level, what about food production zones? Is that fair? Okay, you guys want to take a shot at that?
Sure. So good evening, everyone. I'm Colton Cheng. I'm also with the Hawaiian Electric team. So it's a great set of comments and questions, and this is exactly why we're here tonight, right? Because we have information in databases and reports that defines or identifies facilities that are sort of institutionally identified or categorized for different functions, right? Schools, state buildings, emergency shelters, things like that. But you all live here, right? And you have sort of this community level knowledge of facilities that either are today serving a community supporting function who can do that maybe at a higher, more accelerated basis during an emergency, or to the comment about an unused property or underutilized property that has the potential in the future to do so, right? That's the kind of, I think, useful input that we can get from you, and whether it's tonight or on the Hawaii Powered site, the more specificity you can provide, right? Like your description of the food line, I knew exactly which food line you're talking about, right? The more specificity you can provide and why that particular block or building or property is an important community facility to consider for a microgrid, provide that to us, right? Because it may not be obvious to us when we look at the data that we have that from your perspective, this is going to be an important place to consider for a microgrid.
Thank you, Colton. Could someone from the Hawaiian Electric team or Katie talk about, in a broad term, what the process looks like going forward? If you know, what would be like, are we looking at 3 to 5 years? Are we looking at 1 to 2 years? If there's going to be microgrids put in communities, what are we looking at process-wise in broad terms? Do we have that information yet?
Yeah, I'll take a swing and you guys can jump in it, right? So we've started identifying locations where we want to work with communities to develop microgrids. Many years ago, we built one in Hana, right? Kind of obvious, right? It's so remote from the rest of Maui. We developed or are developing one or proposing to develop one in North Kohala on the Big Island, because electrically, although maybe not obviously geographically, electrically, North Kohala is very separate from the rest of the Big Island in how they get service. So we've already started that, right? We're working with those local communities, but we really want to take it sort of to that next level, to not just look at opportunities for microgrids in onesies and twosies, and not just from a perspective, and Katie said this, right? Not just from the perspective of what the infrastructure might need, right? Because that's sort of just only one way to look at it. We want to do now is start looking at opportunities for microgrids from our customers and the communities that we serve, right? And so that's this process. So that's the process we're starting now. It's going to take a while ultimately to kind of sift through all of the data that we're collecting, the data that we have already put together, to figure out where should we start working with communities to develop them. So that's going to be a multi-year process ultimately to do so. We got to find a way to pay for it. Always a fun part. But there's really no end, right? I mean, I see this as being just an inherently part of what we just do, right? As we start to find more and more opportunities to do microgrids.
Thank you, Colton. So I'm going to tell you what they've said to me and what they've said at other meetings, and that is their commitment is this is the start of a dialogue. So when it comes to talking specifically about East Honolulu, they'll put out the word, and we'll be reconvening to have discussions. But this is a great start. Was there somebody online that wanted, 3 people online? Okay, just to be clear, we've got a whole nother section of information and a whole huge project development process that we want to go through. So we're going to give about 5 more minutes to this process, talking about microgrids. Kanani? Suwan. Okay, Suwan, you'll be on as soon as Kanani opens you up. There you go. Thanks for joining.
Hello. Aloha. Thank you all for sharing this very interesting and super useful information. So I'm Su Wanshen. I'm an associate professor at Urban and Regional Planning at UH Manoa. We are working with SERENE and OCCSR on the Resilience Hub planning project. So we did a community survey back in April, and then we tried to get community inputs on what are the most frequently used community facilities, where are the facilities that they trust as potential community resilience hubs. And it's an ongoing conversation and process still, but we will be happy to share the findings with you guys so that you can also look at the community facilities people identify as key community resilience hubs. We did a similar suitability analysis, but then focusing more, because it's a community facility, we're focusing more on the hazard vulnerability, transportation accessibility, social vulnerability, and community support. And then definitely I say there's overlaps and things we can collaborate all together. But one question regarding this microgrid analysis, I was thinking when I listening to your analysis and conversation here, I try to understand whether when you're talking about microgrid analysis, when you're asking people about what kind of facilities to be included, are you trying to identify the facilities that the microgrid equipment to be on that site, or are you trying to identify the places that microgrid will be serving? Because this can be one place, but it can also be different, right? Depending on what scale you are talking about for the microgrid, right? Sometimes it's on-site, sometimes it can be off-site, serving a smaller community level collected facilities.
Great question. Thank you very much. I'm going to turn it back to Ken on that one. Did you get that question?
Yeah, let me try to restate it so I understand it. The question is, are we looking at, in terms of this microgrid analysis, are we looking at customers that already have the ability or already have resources on their side to become a microgrid?
Actually, let me restate her question. If I get it right, let me know. And that is that what she's asking is, are we asking for a specific location to site a microgrid? In, for example, the Foodland store is a specific location, or are we looking at asking where the community thinks a microgrid hub would be best situated? Those are maybe slightly different. They are slightly different questions, although they may overlap. Was that a good way of understanding your question? Okay.
Yes. So
okay.
It's whether you guys are trying to find where we put PV panels, or are you trying to say, oh, okay, we put the PV panel here in this school, but then it's serving the adjacent community more than that. So are you trying to identify where to put the facilities or where you serve? Right?
To my understanding, it's number two, and that is with your community's knowledge, lived experience, right, of what goes on in your communities. It's let the technical and scientific people do their job of figuring out how it could work. The more important part is where in the communities should these microgrids be considered, because that's when it's going to be the most helpful to us as human beings. Would that be, Katie, please?
Thanks. I would just add in that it's easier to move around the technology, the customer energy resources, whether it's rooftop solar, whatever, batteries, than it is to move around the essential services that a community gathering place serves.
That's a great explanation for that. Did that help you? Cool. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I know there's a couple of people online. We got two, and this is the first night that we're going online. So let's go ahead and we'll take a little bit more on that. I'm calling an audible. We'll take one more question from Angela. Angela, or comment. Angela, please. Welcome.
Hello. Hi. So my name is Angela. I didn't introduce myself the first time. I'm actually one of the research assistants with SERENE at KCC. So a new question that I have is, a modern a more modern issue to consider might be ransomware or like hijacking public facilities. So what my question is how would Hawaiian Electric harden grids in those situations? And also, does the microgrid decentralize the grids operationally?
Thank you. There's two parts to that question. They're great. We got one the other night. Colton, choose, gentlemen. No, you're going to go.
Okay, Angela, I'm Colton. Great question. So,
Questions.
yeah. So you brought up a word that hasn't, I think, come up tonight yet, and that's hardening. So hardening is part of making a system more resilient. Microgrids is a piece of it, but ultimately for a microgrid to be something that you can count on after a disaster, after a major storm, you need to make sure that all parts of that microgrid can survive that event. So it's the solar systems, it's the battery, it's the diesel generator if it has it, part of the microgrid, but it's also all of the wires that connect those resources and all the facilities together. So we definitely need, to your question, Angela, we definitely need to harden the electrical wires, the lines that ultimately form that microgrid. We also need to harden the lines on the rest of the system because we know that we're not going to be able to do a microgrid for every single customer that we serve, right? And ultimately, our mission is to make the electrical system more survivable during or after a major event. Your second question about, does this sort of create more fractal or more distributed electric systems? I think the jury is still out long-term, 20, 30 years on what a modern future electric system will look like. But what I can say with high confidence is that, because we're already seeing it today, is that electrical system will be definitely less centralized and more decentralized. And you kind of need that in order for microgrids to actually be possible, right? Whether that's going to be completely decentralized in the future, I think that remains to be seen because there are things still very important to the reliable and resilient operation of the entire grid that requires larger, more centralized resources to work. But in the future, who knows?
Thank you, Colton. One quick, wait, I want you to answer this because she asked about cyber attacks and hardening that way. So can you briefly give us your response on that?
Okay, so hardening against cyber, right? That's an ever-growing challenge that everyone faces, not just all of us in the electricity sector, but we're particularly at risk because of the reason why we're here tonight, right? Electricity is such a big part of making a society work. So we spend an enormous amount of our resources, money, and people and knowledge to make our electric system resilient and resistant to cyber threats. It's a tough challenge because here in Hawaii, we're particularly feel like we have a bullseye on our back because we serve some really important facilities that help to protect the entire nation from external threats. So we have a huge team, very focused, working with a lot of federal agencies who I won't name because Alani's going to have to make me spell them all out rather than give their three-letter initials. But including state and federal agencies to ensure that we have an electric system that is as resistant and resilient to cyber threats as possible.
Thank you, Colton. I appreciate it. Okay, we're gonna transition over to the second part of our presentation, and then afterwards we'll have a Q&A. Thank you very much.
So this portion of the meeting Great discussion, by the way, and I want to thank all of you for the excellent input. And as Alani mentioned, this is going to be a continuing conversation. What's being shown here right now is the website that was mentioned, hawaiipower.com. So just really briefly wanted to introduce it to all of you in person and online to please visit it when you have time to go through some of the information. Our whole intent, and part of the reason why we're continuing this effort is to take that same long-term planning information, that technical analysis, and make it available to all of you as communities in a simpler format, and also in a way where you can provide input much easier than having to file like a formal filing with the Public Utilities Commission or with Hawaiian Electric. You can send things via email. You can send comments, and that'll all be documented as part of some of the websites that we're sharing with you tonight. So we're attempting at trying to make the process easier for communities to participate in. And really, last comment was, with respect to what Ken is about to share, it really is an initial analysis that, as we're looking at exactly what Bob and some others have mentioned, the bigger macro level of decarbonizing our energy system, what's that going to look like? What's it going to take to get there? And that's the serious issues that are in front of us as communities, and to allow communities to see the same things that we're looking at and to weigh in along the way. We may not have all the answers at this time. We're doing these analyses and studies as we move forward. But again, we want to show those to you as we're performing those studies, and that's part of what Ken's going to be sharing tonight, is this analysis that was done that looked at the potential for wind and solar energy on the island of Oahu, to give us a better idea and visibility on what it's going to look like and what it's going to take as we strive towards reaching our decarbonization goals. But at the same time, allowing communities like the Kona Moku and mokus all over the island of Oahu to see the same things that developers look at when they look at potential for rooftop space, land availability, resource availability, and allowing communities to weigh in on that through a mapping process. So Ken, please go ahead.
Okay, thanks, Kurt. Okay, so I'm going to talk about something pretty different from what we talked about. So we're going to shift our mind from microgrids to now large renewable resources, utility scale resources. We have what's called the Integrated Grid Planning Process, and that's what we call IGP. IGP is our path to a Hawaii-powered future. Ultimately, we want to get to 100% renewable energy across all islands by 2045. And while 2045 seems like a long time from now, and it's really not that far away when you take into account the infrastructure that's required to get there. So the planning starts now, and that's why we're here to seek your input. The challenge to create this clean energy grid takes into account a multitude of issues. One is to stay on track with the state's timelines, as well as our goals. We need to make sure that as we head towards that 100%, we stabilize costs for our customers. We also have to make sure that as we do this transition, we reduce conflicts with other land use priorities. And we have to make sure that we minimize impacts to communities, and overall, we improve the resilience and reliability as we get there. We don't want to impact any further what we have today. Where we are today, Clean Energy Oahu, we have, so this map shows where we are today. So each dot is where there's a utility scale resource on Oahu. So on Oahu, we have 1,143 megawatts of as available renewable capacity. So that's, it's called as available because these are essentially solar or wind resources. They're not available 24/7. They're available when they're available. And as part of the 1,143 megawatts, 763 of that are customer-sited resources. So that's the share of the megawatt capacity that is provided by essentially rooftop solar. There's other types of customer-sided resources as well, but a large chunk of that is rooftop. In development today, we have 384 megawatts, and that's through what we call our stage 1 and stage 2 procurements. There's a lot of these under construction. You hear about them in the news. But as we get to 100%, we need to start to displace or address what we currently have as the bulk of it on our firm capacity. A lot of our firm capacity is based on fossil fuel, and so we need to either replace that with larger amounts of as available renewable capacity, or also renewable firm capacity. So to get to this 100% future, we can't just focus on utility scale resources. We have to also increase customer-sided resources. So both utility scale renewable resources need to increase substantially, and also rooftop solar, batteries at folks' homes. All of that has to increase substantially for us to displace all the necessary firm generation that we have, or firm non-renewable resources that we have on the system. So this analysis, I feel like I'm losing people here. This analysis is an initial step. And so this is what we call a renewable energy zone analysis. And this is a kind of a standard type of analysis that's done across the industry. And what this does is it tries to look at where are there available areas on the island that has the potential to site renewable resources. And for our initial analysis, we looked at where is there good potential for solar or wind resources, taking into account other types of land uses that are excluded from the analysis. But based on this, we're trying to project out what are the necessary changes or additions we need to make to our system, to our transmission system, so that we can accept this much capacity in these various areas. So again, we started with wind and solar because we also have the data for that, but this is really a transmission exercise. So it's a getting megawatts into the system type of exercise. So it could be actually any type of resource in any of these areas. We're just trying to plan out for where we should be targeting, or not targeting, that's the wrong word, where we should be planning for, or where there has a potential to have resources, and what that necessary transmission infrastructure looks like. So this is our initial look at it. In this map, which is also available online, and that's where we actually want you to go to eventually. It's on the flyers that came out. You can go online, you're gonna see this map, and you can put a pin drop on certain areas, and essentially we wanna know where there's areas that are either good opportunities for renewable development, or where we should be avoiding. In this map, the green shows where the potential areas are, and based on those potential areas, we kind of group them together so that we could plan out where the necessary transmission could go or should go to support this. And so this is what the online map looks like. There's a QR code on here, but it's also available on the flyer, and that's where we really want your feedback. Okay, and then now we'll get into another Q&A.
So what Ken shared was, again, just an analysis. And so what we're also working on, we had some really good input at some previous workshops. This was looking at available land, available resource. And so you'll notice a lot of it is focused on areas where there was a lot of different considerations in terms of, land that's not designated as zone for agricultural zone 1, or even conservation land that had to be taken out of the mix. But that's not to say that renewable resources shouldn't also be looked at from an island-wide basis. And so what we're working on is adding what rooftop solar potential or distributed energy resources potential to that map that Ken shared, and we're going to be making that available online as well. We're in the early stages of compiling that data and making that accessible online. But again, that's the type of information we hope to share with all of you so that you can weigh in and share input, comments, and questions. So that's just a reminder. We're going to be pulling up the Menti again so people can post comments for everybody to see. Again, all of that gets documented as part of this process. All of you in person can ask questions, and you can also contribute in the comments online and on Menti and also on the Zoom. So that being said, can we go to the prompting question really quick?
While they're doing that, just to put a time on everything, it's 8:15. We're going to, Olelo will stop their filming at 8:30. We're not going to run out the door at 8:30. So if you folks want to continue the conversation a little bit afterwards, we're happy to do that.
Thanks, Alani. And I'll just keep this quick, but this is just for a prompting question, something to think about. And again, if you join us on hawaiipowered.com, and you go to this page that has the section on renewable energy zones analysis that Ken mentioned, you can answer the same question online if you need more time to think about it. But really, we're looking for community feedback and input on the types of factors to consider as part of this renewable energy planning process. You can also comment on the analysis that Ken has showed, and some interesting comments popping up here. But feel free to ask any questions, comments, or observations about what was shared, and we're happy to answer that. But again, this is going to be something that will continue on going forward. So we hope to have more conversations to come.
Thank you, Kurt. So I want to put a fine point on this process because it's a little confusing. Let's take, for example, if you look at the maps, right? From a scientific point of view, we all know that there's a lot of solar energy available mid-island and on the west side. But from a lived experience, from a human point of view, I grew up Ewa Beach. I spent a lot of years on the west side. If you know that side of the island, you know that they host the island's only dump. They host Makua Valley, the biggest training range on this island. They host, back from the 60s, the biggest single power plant, and that is at Kahe. There's a number of things that the west side hosts for the benefit of the entire island. They take the impacts of those. Now, if you look at the maps, we should just cover that coast with solar farms. Now, from a social justice point of view, nobody's taking, or the science of it doesn't take into account all of the other impacts that coast is experiencing. And the West Side leaders have told us very clearly that needs to be a factor, that they are hosting facilities and have hosted them for decades for the benefit of the rest of the island without any recognition or social justice applied to that situation. Now, this process of looking at these maps, what is going to happen is, as Hawaiian Electric develops their request for proposals, their RFPs for major renewable energy and firm renewable energy projects, they are going to have to cite them somewhere. And this is the information that we want to get out to everybody so that you can comment, you as community people can comment about what your thoughts are, what should be the factors that maybe we're not looking at or haven't thought about. So I don't want to talk anymore. We got some comments coming in. Thank you.
So kind of along those same lines about environmental justice, is there any consideration when you do inevitably go to bid to require within those bid processes that these communities that will inevitably host these sites receive reduced rates or other cost benefits or other community benefits? Because like you mentioned, so many communities are having to bear this burden with no real recognition or reward.
That's a great question, and Ken is going to take, Kurt is going to take that on.
Well, that's an excellent point, and we have some very important work ahead of us with respect to those requests for proposals. What's currently in front of us immediately is what's known as the Stage 3 RFP. It's going to come out first for Hawaii Island, followed by Maui County and Oahu. And so, Maui Island, I'm sorry, and Oahu. But as part of that, for the first time, will be requirements for community benefits. And so that's something that is currently under review by the Public Utilities Commission. We are very close to filing, that final version of that RFP with the PUC. But that's going to be something that will be occurring going forward. A lot of that had to do with the input that we received from communities like West Oahu that had to bear this infrastructure and project siting. So we've learned by working with them what types of things to incorporate. This is a new process, so there's a lot of things that need to be considered, and that's why input like this is so helpful, because it's not going to be perfect, and we really want to ensure that what benefits do go into the communities go to what's known as host communities. So the ones who live closest to the project, making sure that investment is going back to address needs that host community and that impacted area identifies. So that's currently for this stage of RFPs, but there's a lot more that can be done at the community level. And so that's another part of this discussion on what other elements can be incorporated to make the process more equitable as we move forward.
Thank you, Kurt. Next.
Thanks. I work out of the chancellor's office at this campus, and I'm sure she would appreciate it if I announced that Kapi'olani Community College is not an evacuation center, but Kaimuki Middle School is. So those of you out there in this part of town, that would probably be where you would go. I don't want to overcommit Kaimuki Middle School. I will uncommit KCC to being an evacuation center. And we are working with Kaimuki Middle School to develop an solar energy backup system across the street. The rationale for that was that we have a number of responders in this part of town. We have the Red Cross, we have DOD, we have HIEMA, we have the Diamond Head State Park folks who play a role. We have a DAGS facility. We even have the theater across. There's a lot of people that we can involve in a conversation about their energy needs. And I think that's another kind of way of thinking of this, is where are the fire and safety and where are the responders and what kind of energy will they need, and how do you source that and cite that?
Thank you very much. That, just to be clear, that's going to a certain extent, that's going back to the concept of microgrids. What we're looking at here in the second part of this discussion are really macro grid projects. What's going to power us on a macro scale? We've got a few more minutes. Is there anything online? I'm checking in with Kanani. We've got about 8 minutes left for the live broadcast. And we have somebody. Oh, it's in the chat. Okay. So, okay.
Okay, so this question is from Ivalani. She is from Serene and also a student at the University of Hawaii Manoa. Her question was whether there was any plans in place for mobile microgrids to assist emergency response teams or organizations and emergency shelters during natural disasters or times of crisis.
So the question to clarify is, are there any plans for mobile microgrids?
Okay, so I'll take it, but my boss will probably add to it. I think, so we do have plans in place generally to allow those types of situations. So in the Ko'olapoko area, which was discussed earlier, we did work with that community, and we have conceptually created areas that could host, that could be isolated from the grid in times of emergency, and host a mobile generator that can power that certain area. So there is the ability to do that. That takes a lot of planning and design involved to do that, but we do have that ability.
Okay, what I'm hearing from you folks is the capability is there, but as if anything that needs to be mobile, it's more resource intensive, costs more, and it's going to be harder to engineer. Make it short.
Yeah. So when we say mobile, it's the generator that's mobile, right? The facilities that are part of the microgrid is there. We need to reinforce that area. We need to design the lines in the area to be microgridable. But what we heard from the Kolaupoko community is they wanted to pursue an opportunity where the generators weren't fixed there, right? You didn't build and install and site a generator there for that storm event. And so that's the part that's mobile.
Thank you very much, Clayton. Sorry. Colton. Questions, concerns? I'd like to go back to the second part of the discussion, which is on the meta scale. Are we getting the factors right for considering where to put in the large scale, utility scale energy projects? And I know these are like big thought process questions, but if you have any ideas, if you want to feedback to us, that would be super helpful now. It's just the start of the conversation.
We've been giving this a lot of thought for 2 or 3 years now, and my point earlier was that these responders row folks, there's a lot of space right down here between KCC and 22nd Avenue that's sort of DOD land, and seems to me would be plenty solar. And the other piece would be around food availability and, the area around the airport for, keeping food moving out of there to where it would normally go to a supermarket, but it might now go to other places. So those 2 locations, and I wanted to bring the larger question back to this area, which is, this kind of key area out here but I know there's some neighborhood board concerns about anything we do here on Diamond Head. And I just think that that's probably an obvious audience for you to continue to talk to.
Thank you. And you bring up an important point, and that is that as we've seen over the past several years, and the biggest example, right, is Mauna Kea. There are hard questions that we are going to have to answer as a culture and a society. That we're already at that point. And in my own opinion and in my own experience, the only way that we positively work those out is by engaging the community and engaging the community early. And having you folks all be part of the process as we go along. So I can't overstate how important, even though this is a challenge time-wise and concentration-wise, this is where good policy gets built. It's where a good society gets built. And I encourage us all to keep working at it because we're not going to solve this alone. Yeah? So we've got a couple more minutes. Is there anything, Kanani, I'm checking with you. Thank you. I'll be right there. Hold off. Please go ahead.
Thank you. So one of my questions, a lot of the renewable energy zones and the analysis that you've shown, it's focused on solar, wind, biofuels, the big technologies that we have. I'm curious how the IGP would incorporate new technologies such as geothermal, offshore wind, hydrogen into the analysis going forward and as those technologies become more commercially viable.
Great question. Thank you. Who wants to take that?
So thanks, Monique. So the res maps that we're showing tonight, as I think Ken mentioned it, is based upon solar and wind potential, and it's because that's where we have the data. But as Monique points out, we're going through an integrated grid planning process now, where we're trying to develop portfolios for the energy system into the future. So these different other technologies, geothermal, biomass, hydrogen from renewables, those are other candidate technologies and resources that we're evaluating as part of the IGP process. So when we get into the phase where we start developing plans around it, those technologies will be considered. We do our best to identify sort of forward-looking advancements to it, so how do costs for existing as well as newer technologies change over time, and factor that into the selection of a portfolio. But ultimately, that's a plan that helps inform decision-making for the future. What we ultimately develop in the future may end up being different, will likely be a little bit different, because there are a lot of these non-scientific, non-technical aspects, things like land use policy, things from outside of the energy space that will affect energy, like agriculture or water, that will ultimately factor into what we do as a society.
Thank you, Colton. Did that get it? Sure. And we'll take one. This is going to be the last question for the taped part.
I think there's also some technologies that are, kind of ready that we haven't necessarily looked at, such as hydropower with dams and pumped storage hydro that could also be considered.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Did you want to? Okay. Got it. Understood. Thank you. Okay. What we're going to do is we're going to close the meeting. It's formally close it. It's 8:30, but you folks are welcome to stick around and we can have, a more intimate discussion with all of the subject matter experts. I'm going to let Kurt close. Sorry, go ahead.
I want to ask it just for the record because it's kind of
Please
important.
do.
Hi, thank you. There was just a question that came up here in one of the Menti that was a kind of an important question, and I'd love to have the answer just so we have it on the record and to make sure that everyone had it, which was, will nuclear power or other dangerous technologies be considered as part of this process?
Thank you for catching that. Really appreciate it. Who wants to take this one? Colton. Yep.
Yeah. So nuclear power specifically, and I'll preface it by saying I actually have a degree in nuclear engineering. It's banned. It's constitutionally banned in the state of Hawaii. So as we're looking in our plans for our future, at least at this point, we're not considering it, right? Just because of what's needed to get there.
So in layperson's terms, what that means is there was a law passed quite a while ago at the state level, state legislature, that banned the use of nuclear power for power generation on the grid anywhere in the islands. What that would mean is if that were to be entertained, the legislature would have to change the law. Among other things, but definitely the legislature would have to change the law. That's not being discussed now, so that's why Colton's saying it's not on the table. Thank you very much for bringing that up. Really appreciate it. Kurt, you want to close off?
Just wanted to thank all of you for joining us tonight. As you know, the whole intention of tonight's meeting was really to introduce these very challenging concepts. A lot of you here and online have been giving this a lot of thought, which we deeply appreciate. So as we mentioned, all of this is going to be documented. All of you who contributed to the Menti, that's all going to be part of this report that we're going to compile and share back with all of you. And so that's just the start. That by no means is a complete product. But we're going to continue to engage if there are opportunities where we can come and join you in the circles or the meetings that you're in. We will gladly participate in those conversations. But really, as everyone mentioned, this is something we all need to do together. It's super important. It's far in front of us, but close in front of us enough where we need to take it very seriously. But with that, I just wanted to again promote, if you can leverage any of the resources and the information that we're trying to make available to the community via hawaiipower.com. There's a lot of good information there. Again, the technical analysis in a way and shown in a way that's more simplified, in ways you can provide input and comments. And if you have suggestions on how we can improve this too, please do send that our way at igp@hawaiielectric.com. So a lot of different ways to participate, but we really welcome and encourage you to continue coming out, continue engaging. Thank you for spending your time and your evening with us. And if you can share this information with others in your circles who might be interested, we would deeply appreciate it. But on behalf of Hawaiian Electric, mahalo to all of you joining us in person, online, and watching on Olelo. Thank you to the Olelo crew for all of your hard work. Mahalo, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And we're going to still be around if anybody has any questions or anything they wanted to share. Mahalo. Thank you.